Hello, guys. I have a few safety tips, and I'll give you about, say, two or three stories of my experience here in Ukraine in terms of safety. If you were to get mugged or attacked or something of this, and I'll give you the best way to tackle the issue, quite literally tackle the issue. Um, I can tell you this, and I learned this in Russia, okay? To understand, like, the difference in culture between, like, in the US, if someone points a gun or has a knife and says, give me your money, and that the idea is to either calm the situation down or to go like, here you go, and hope they leave because you don't want a situation to get worse. And in like Eastern Europe, Russia, Slavic culture generally, my experience, you do the opposite behavior. You don't back down. You go full steam forward. To understand, there I've had probably maybe say a dozen incidents over the past 10 years. And they've not been bad, they've been mild, they've been little things here and there. Um, I'll give an example of everything that I always dealt with within Russia. One time I had an apartment in St. Petersburg, and I rented it with a Russian guy. The Russian guy was never there. I lived in the apartment for like 3 months. He never visited, only but maybe say 3 times, and he never spent the night. But he had an issue with how I did dishes, okay? How he did dishes, which was probably more military fashion, was you get a dish, it's dirty, you clean it immediately, it's done. My way of doing it was kind of more, laid back, a little bit lazy point of view was fill up the sink with water, put the soap in, let it soak, then rinse and let it get wet and all the crap goes off and everything. And this is like, I would do this over a process of a few hours or a day. And that was my process. He hated that process. And he even on couch surfing left me he's the most laid back guy, I couldn't stand it attitude. Now, later, before I was leaving, he also did not like the fact that I was friends with a Muslim guy, and that, which was a friend of a friend. And that what happened was, is because Yuri was not really there so much, I saw no issue of it. I was the only person in a 2-bedroom apartment, and there was enough room for 3 or 4 people. I didn't see an issue with another guy coming in and paying just a little bit of rent and kind of keeping me company. We could bullshit together and all of this stuff. But Yuri did not like this. Even though I asked him about it, he did not like this. He assumed that the Muslim guy was a sex tourist and a this and a that and everything. He assumed the worst of him. And because there's a Russian stereotypes of Muslims. Some that are a little profane to say. Um, the best way to put is when me and the Muslim guy were leaving, and that Yuri wanted to know exactly the day, exactly the time, exactly everything when I was gonna leave, and I refused to give it to him, and that because it wasn't his issue. I said maybe I'll go this day, maybe I'll go that day. I don't know, but he wanted to know exactly when I would go. So I refused to give it to him. This irritated him. It irritated him so much that he started annoying me for 2 days and going, when are you going to leave? 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 I ignored it. And so one day, while having the Tunisian friend, who is Muslim, over, in that he starts kind of very subtly, very politely, um, basically trying to instigate a fight with me. Yuri does. And by doing this, he's swinging his hand around like this, and then he's swinging it around the midsection and everything else, trying to see how I would react. I didn't react at all. So in turn, he just shoves. He literally pushes and shoves me, which started a fight. This started a fight in the room. The Tunisian friend got involved in that, but basically it was a push back and a few punches back and forth and that. Now, I would say that even though I may not win a fight because of my handicap, I can at least hold my ground and take a beating and make sure that they take a little bit of a beating too. And that, not that I would win, but I'd make sure I can hold for a bit. But the thing about it is I held my ground. The key point is holding your ground, or if you get pushed, you push back. Or if you get pushed, you push back harder is the key. But what happens is the Tunisian friend breaks it up. The Russian one ends up going, and runs off into his room and shuts the door. That's what he does. And basically, he was outnumbered at that point. Which at that time, in 2011, I made a joke of, well, it's like the Muslim Brotherhood comes to save the American. For those that think about politics and news later, throughout the past 10 years. But what happens is that was first instance. I can tell you in other instances, here in Ukraine, I'll give another instance of in Ukraine. And that it was within the first few weeks of me being in Ukraine. Paul knows this story generally. I walked out at 10 o'clock at night. I was out maybe till 2 or 3 in the morning. And there was some beggars about. There was some beggars. And with these beggars, they basically kind of walked around, and there was about 3 to 4 of them. And what they did, there was one facing me, one facing my left, and one behind me. And I can't remember if there was another. There was at least 3 to 4 of them. They cornered me. And on an open street, a very open and public street, where people could see, but it was too late to be out. They very well cornered me. And they're like, money, 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 grivna, grivna. And they would say stuff in Ukrainian. And I go, don't know what you're saying, don't know. And I'm like, and I signal like, I'm going to go this way. And they wouldn't let me go through that way. Now, anyone in the U.S. would normally be like, maybe I'll give you something and basically give you an inch, they'll go away. If you give them any inch, if you give them any money, they think that you will have more money. And if they think you have more money, then you're going to screw yourself, because then you really will get mugged. They're not going to go away, because it's a thing of, if you give a little bit, they'll take about 10 more inches or more. But I can tell you, there was a nice stare-off between me and the first guy, the guy on there, and the guy behind me. And they would sit there and go, money, money, money. I would say, I don't have anything. Then they would say it again. I would say, I don't have anything. Then they would do it again. And I'd say, I don't fucking have anything. Get the fuck away. And in general, they start getting a little, and that. And then I would do this with each of them, because they're working in a tangent together. But what happens is, generally, that I started getting more pensive and more like I was going to pounce on them versus them pouncing on me. And to be honest, the general mindset if you get in a really bad situation, you basically have to have a mindset that says, if I go down, I'm going to for sure as hell take them with me. And that, or if they start a fight, they're going to get it real bad. Now, I did that with all three of them. Didn't give them nothing. Now, to understand, what I was doing in my left side of my pocket at the same time, I was getting keys between my fingers, just in case. In that, because I didn't know how far it would escalate. But I was preparing my mindset for whatever in that. But I was not going to give them an inch and a yard at all. If anything, I was going to shove them back. Now, there was another instance here in Lviv. It was 4 a.m. And again, you could say in a lot of ways, I was at fault of this because I was either out too late or basically I should have thought and known better in that. But what happens is at 4 a.m., I was walking around. I see a guy across the street. He sees me. I see him. I'm deciding whether I should cross the street this way or keep walking this way. And I eventually decide to go right, which this guy crosses. I didn't think much of it. I'm still going. And I look back for a second and I realize he's getting closer. So I'm still walking, then I turn a corner. He turns a corner. And then when I turn another corner, he turns another corner too. So at that point, when he turned 2 corners, I knew he was following. And what happens is I eventually turned another corner and I waited for him. And that, I very much waited for him. Again, I had keys ready and everything else. Now, before I turned the last corner, I started fumbling very openly in my pockets because I wanted it to be a warning sign to him. What is he reaching for in his pocket? And that, I started very openly fumbling in that because what could I have in my pocket? I wanted him to think that. Now, when I turned the last corner, he turns around, and I'm sure he was drunk. I'm sure he was probably a normal, decent guy, but he was drunk. Key point, he was drunk. But what happens is, in the end of it all, he basically sits there, goes, money, dollar, money, dollar. He goes, don't have anything. So what's he do? He pulls something out of his pocket. He starts flashing this little flashlight at me. And that, just like doing this and waving the flashlight around. And I'm looking at him like, what the hell are you doing? And keep in mind, at this time, I have my thumb inside of my main pocket where my wallet is, where my keys are, everything. Now, when he does it again, I sat there and I reached up my hand. He had his hand like this. So what I did, I reached up my hand like this and shoved his other hand away. What the stupid thing, what he did, was then he grabs my left arm. And what I did this and grabbed into his other arm. And I pushed him up against the wall. And he's sitting there going, money. And he looks at me still. And I knew 2 things yet again. If I would have started walking, he would have still followed. So I had to scare him off. The thing on top of it was he did it again. And I just sat there and said, get the fuck away from me. And then I basically growled it to him. And he looked at me very spooked and not terrified, but spooked that I would change my voice just to get him. And then I shoved him again. And he went. And that. Now, should you do that for every situation? No. But what you need to do is not be emotional. What you need not to do is show fear or anything of the thing that says, I'm going to cave to your demand. If you do that, they will run right over you. And it's not because they are mean people, it's not because of this, it's not because of that. It's because some Ukrainians, some, like anyone that's from this area, they don't understand, from what my opinion, they don't understand that they come from this level of income or this level of lifestyle, and how everything is going up but they are staying poor. And when they see a chance, I believe, at certain times, in order to move up or do a little bit better for now, they take the opportunity for it because, hell, if you were poor for 10 or 20 years and you could only afford to eat, yet you could do nothing else in your life, and then you see maybe someone that has a little bit more money, or you know that they would not necessarily hurt if they lost a little bit of money, what would you do in that? There are some people, and I can understand that. It's a thing of desperation. After a certain point, you get too desperate. So, in my opinion, there should be some sympathy towards these types. Not sympathy for all of them, because some of them are probably more crooks than anything. But for some, you have to realize where they are coming from in that. It's not necessarily that you're going to get attacked, you're going to get beat, you're going to get murdered. That's not going to happen. It's just that they're going to instill some type of fear, or the idea that, you have more money than me. Why don't you give me something? And that, let's exchange. And that, now the question is how much do you want to exchange? You can exchange talking about culture, enjoying your time, or you can exchange money and blah, blah, blah. Or you can say, let me buy you something. And they would probably be grateful to you if you did something nice for them. But it's the idea that you should generally treat them with some kind of class if they do not act appropriately. If they act in the wrong way, then you for sure should, if push comes to shove, you kind of have to shove back in self-defense. But that is my first little fun tip for the fun group of Veronicas and everything else. So, hope you enjoyed the tip. Hope it wasn't too boring.